What is envy? Most people will tell you it is nothing more than wanting what someone else has. But if that were all, envy would be harmless, even motivating. Envy, however, is darker. It is not simply desire. It is desire poisoned with resentment. It is the smile that hides a dagger. It is the mask of friendship worn by someone who would rather see you stumble than rise. Philosophers and psychologists across the centuries have recognized envy as one of the most destructive, corrosive forces in human nature. Aristotle called it pain at another's good fortune. Nietzsche went further. He saw envy as the shadow that follows achievement, the silent parasite that clings to every success. In the language of Carl Jung, envy belongs to the shadow archetype, the part of the psyche we deny in ourselves but project onto others, sometimes with venomous intensity. Think of Cain and Abel. The story is ancient, but the pattern is eternal. Abel's offering was accepted, Cain's was not. What followed was not merely disappointment, it was the slow-burning poison of envy. Cain did not simply wish for better fortune, he wished Abel's fortune destroyed. He did not seek to rise to his brother's level, he sought to drag his brother down into the dust. That is envy's secret. It does not want equality, it wants subtraction. Now think of modern life. The colleague who smiles at your promotion but whispers about your flaws in the break room. The friend who praises your relationship to your face but rolls their eyes in private. The social media follower who likes your photo but secretly wishes you would fail. This is the world of envy, a masquerade ball where every smile may conceal a plot. Sigmund Freud observed that envy often hides itself behind rationalizations. Someone might say, I only criticize because I care, or I just want to keep you humble. But beneath the surface lies something rawer. A frustration that another person's success feels like proof of their own inadequacy. The envious person cannot celebrate you because your light casts a shadow over their own insecurity. Envy is therefore not passive, it is active, it seeks expression. Sometimes it whispers in gossip, sometimes it sabotages opportunities, sometimes it fuels revolutions as the masses, envious of the few, rise not to create more, but to destroy what others have built. Think of the French Revolution, where envy disguised itself as justice. Some grievances were real, but envy magnified them until guillotines fell not only on the guilty, but on the gifted, the accomplished, the envied. Nietzsche warned of this when he described ressentiment, the moral inversion born from envy. Those who feel powerless redefine strength as evil, wealth as greed, beauty as vanity. They create an ethic of weakness that punishes vitality. In their hands, envy becomes a philosophy, a way of explaining why they deserve what they could never create. And yet, envy is not always loud. Sometimes it is subtle, polite, invisible to the untrained eye. It lingers in the half-smile, in the faint delay before congratulations, in the careful tone of advice that cuts rather than builds. It is why so many of history's great leaders, from Julius Caesar to Abraham Lincoln, faced not only open enemies but friends whose envy worked in silence. So here is our question. How do we spot envy when it smiles at us? How do we defend ourselves from a force that hides beneath civility? And more importantly, how do we master envy within ourselves before it corrodes our own spirit? This is the secret life of envy, a life hidden in plain sight while plotting your fall. Envy rarely introduces itself honestly. Nobody says, I envy you and I want to see you fall. Instead, envy dresses itself in courtesy, in praise, in smiles. Why? Because envy knows that if it appeared naked, it would be condemned. Even the envious person feels shame for harboring it, so it hides. Plato once wrote that the soul has three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Envy sneaks between them. It knows that reason would expose it, so it hides in the appetites of insecurity, the restless hunger for recognition. It knows that the spirited part of the soul, which seeks honor, might resist it, so it disguises itself as harmless emotion. Envy operates like a spy, invisible until it strikes. Carl Jung would call this disguise a shadow mask. The envious person cannot face their own sense of inadequacy, so they project their dissatisfaction outward. They appear supportive because that appearance protects their ego, but beneath the mask lies a simmering hostility. Their smile is not a reflection of joy, it is camouflage. History is littered with examples of this mask. Consider Brutus, the trusted ally of Julius Caesar. To Caesar's face, Brutus wore loyalty, he spoke the words of friendship, yet in the Senate chamber the mask fell away and the knives came out. Et tu, Brute, is not simply a line of betrayal, it is the cry of every man who has trusted the smile of envy, only to discover the steel behind it. Or think of politics today. Leaders often surround themselves with advisors and allies who beam for the cameras, who clap the loudest at speeches. But how many of those smiles conceal envy? How many of those applauses are rehearsed while behind closed doors whispers spread and plots are hatched? Every scandal, every palace coup, every sudden betrayal has envy at its root, wearing the mask of loyalty until the very last moment. In psychology, we see the mask of envy in everyday life. The co-worker who congratulates you on your success, but their words drip with backhanded compliments. I'm so impressed you got that promotion, even though you've been here less time than others. The friend who praises your new relationship, then follows it with, I hope it lasts longer than the last one. These are not accidents. They are tiny fractures in the mask, brief leaks of the venom inside. Sigmund Freud noted that the human psyche has strong defenses against unbearable truths. Envy is unbearable because it forces someone to admit, I am not enough. Instead of confronting that, they wear a mask of false kindness. But as Nietzsche warned, what is repressed does not die. It grows, mutates, and eventually bursts forth. Resentment turned into philosophy, is nothing but envy in a grander disguise. Consider social media, our modern theater of envy. The like button itself has become a mask. People press it not always out of joy, but often out of social obligation, sometimes even out of rivalry. They perform agreement, while in private they scorn. The digital smile, like the physical one, conceals a darker wish. I hope this person slips, so I may feel taller. The danger is not only that envy smiles at us, the danger is that we believe the smile. We take words at face value. We assume applause is admiration. We confuse performance with authenticity. And when we do, we walk blindly into the traps envy sets. So the first lesson in disarming envy is this: learn to see beyond the mask. Train your perception not only on what is said, but on what is unsaid. Look for the delay before the applause, the tension in the eyes, the subtle barb wrapped in a joke, the nervous energy in praise that feels more like relief than celebration. Marcus Aurelius advised himself in his meditations to observe the soul of others, not their gestures. The soul, he wrote, becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The mask may shine with smiles, but if the inner thoughts are bitter, eventually the dye seeps through. And here lies the paradox. Envy must smile because it cannot risk exposure, but the very need for the mask is its weakness. Once you see through it, once you refuse to be deceived by false praise or half-hearted compliments, envy loses its power over you. Envy is not content to remain hidden forever. Like a toxin in the bloodstream, it eventually spreads. What begins as a silent smile, what begins as a subtle mask, slowly becomes a force of destruction. It does not only harm the person who is envied, it corrodes the very soul of the one who envies. In personal relationships, envy acts like acid. Friendships wither when one person secretly resents the other's growth. A marriage cracks when one partner begins to envy the other's success instead of celebrating it. Brothers and sisters fall out, not because of lack of love, but because of the quiet, gnawing sense that one has been favored more than the other. Even the Bible knew this truth. Wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? Proverbs 27:4. Anger burns quickly, but envy lingers like smoke in the lungs. History provides no shortage of lessons. Consider the court of King Saul in the Old Testament. When David defeated Goliath, the people sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." That chorus of admiration became the poison that infected Saul's heart. From that day, Saul looked upon David with envy, and the relationship between king and servant collapsed. The envy did not elevate Saul, it destroyed him, gnawed at his peace, and eventually drove him into madness. Nietzsche once warned that envy, when allowed to grow unchecked, transforms into a philosophy of destruction. He called it ressentiment, the moralizing of weakness. The envious person, unable to create, begins to preach that creation itself is evil. Unable to achieve, they label achievement unjust. This poison doesn't stop at individuals, it infects entire societies. Think of the French Revolution. The cry for liberty and equality was noble, but envy soon distorted it. The guillotine did not discriminate between oppressors and innovators. Scientists, writers, and statesmen, anyone who stood taller than the mob, were cut down. Equality, fueled by envy, became not the lifting of the lowly but the dragging down of the accomplished. As Tocqueville observed, revolutions often destroy the very vitality they need in order to thrive. Closer to our time, look at the world of business and politics. How many leaders have been toppled not because they failed, but because their success provoked envy? Whistleblowers can serve justice, yes, but they can also serve envy. Campaigns of sabotage often wear the clothing of morality, when underneath they are fueled by resentment. In every workplace gossip chain, in every anonymous leak, the shadow of envy lurks. Yet the greatest victim of envy is not the target, it is the envious person themselves. Carl Jung noted that projection is a form of self-torture. The envious soul projects their own inadequacy onto another, then fights the shadow they themselves created. It is a war they can never win, because the real enemy is within. Sigmund Freud saw envy as an unresolved trauma of the self. When a child feels overlooked, when recognition is scarce, envy grows as a coping mechanism, but left unresolved, it becomes a lifelong curse. The adult who cannot rejoice in another's joy, the worker who cannot admire a colleague's talent, the friend who cannot celebrate without secretly bleeding inside. The paradox is tragic. Envy seeks to diminish others, but in the process it diminishes the one who envies. It steals peace, erodes gratitude, and blinds the heart to beauty. What should inspire admiration becomes unbearable proof of personal lack. The envious person cannot enjoy art without resenting the artist, cannot enjoy friendship without resenting the friend, cannot even enjoy their own victories, because someone else's greater victory will always shadow them. This is why Marcus Aurelius, in his quiet meditations, advised himself to focus only on his own work, his own duty. To measure life by another's fortune is to drink poison daily. To measure it by one's own integrity is to remain free. So we see, envy does not only plot against you, it plots against itself. It is a fire that burns inward, consuming the vessel that carries it. When envy enters a relationship, a workplace, or a nation, It corrodes from within until nothing remains but ashes. To truly grasp envy's secret life, we must look not only at psychology, but at the grand theatre of history and myth. Because envy is not new. It is as old as humanity itself, and the stories of our ancestors testify that envy has always stalked greatness. The Bible gives us perhaps the most primal account, Cain and Abel. Cain was not rejected because he had nothing, he had an offering, but Abel's was accepted, and that difference was intolerable. Envy drove Cain not to improve himself, but to eliminate his brother. And so the first murder in human history was not born of hunger or war, but of envy. This is the ancient warning. Envy kills, not for gain, but for the twisted satisfaction of subtraction. Greek mythology offers another glimpse. Consider Hera, queen of the gods, who envied mortals blessed with beauty or favor. Her envy turned her into a persecutor, hunting women and children whose only crime was being loved by Zeus. Again we see the same pattern. Envy does not seek balance, it seeks ruin. To Hera, the happiness of others was an intolerable insult. In Rome, the historian Tacitus warned that the hatred of rivals is fiercer than that of enemies. And he was right. Rivals do not envy from afar. They envy up close, where comparison is sharpest. This is why Caesar fell not at the hands of barbarians, but in the Senate, surrounded by peers who could not stomach his rising star. Fast forward to the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, two titans of art, shared mutual disdain. Each recognized the other's genius, and that recognition fueled envy. Their rivalry produced masterpieces, yes, but it also poisoned relationships, sowed bitterness, and turned Florence's art scene into a battlefield of brushes and chisels. Envy, paradoxically, can spur creation, but always at the cost of peace. Even in modern times, envy writes its chapters. Consider the world of technology. When Steve Jobs and Bill Gates clashed, their rivalry became the stuff of legend. Was it merely competition? Or was envy whispering, each man resenting the shadow of the other's success? Out of that tension emerged innovation, but also betrayal, lawsuits, and years of personal animosity. Envy sharpened their edge, but it also carved scars. Or take politics today. Rival parties rarely admit it, but envy often fuels their venom. They envy the popularity, the charisma, the influence of opponents. Instead of building their own virtues, they devote energy to tearing down others. The smear campaign, the scandal, the leaked email. Envy modernized, digitized, weaponized. The tools change, but the impulse is ancient. Pop culture gives us yet another mirror. Think of the endless celebrity feuds, singers, actors, influencers. One star ascends, another throws shade. A friendly collaboration turns sour when one envies the spotlight of the other. The gossip columns laugh, but beneath the headlines lies the same Cain and Abel impulse. If I cannot outshine you, I will try to dim your light. Carl Jung noted that myths are mirrors of the human soul. The recurring theme of envy in myth, from the jealous gods of Olympus to the cursed brothers of Scripture, is not coincidence, it is testimony. Humanity has always known that envy is the hidden saboteur of greatness. Every culture told stories about it because every culture lived with it. And yet, envy's role in history is double-edged. It destroys, yes, but it also reveals. Wherever there is greatness, envy gathers. Wherever there is light, shadows form. Perhaps this is why Nietzsche urged the strong to endure envy as proof of vitality. To be envied is dangerous, but it is also a sign that one's life has weight, that one's presence cannot be ignored. But here lies the haunting truth: envy never ends. When one rival falls, another rises. When one idol is toppled, another takes their place. Humanity's myths and histories echo the same refrain. Envy is eternal, as constant as ambition itself. To understand envy's secret life, we must leave history and myth for a moment and descend into the laboratory of the mind. What happens inside the human psyche when envy takes root? Why does another person's success feel like a wound? And why does envy so often wear the mask of civility? Sigmund Freud believed envy is rooted in the unconscious. He described it as a defense mechanism. When faced with another's success, the ego feels threatened. The psyche cannot tolerate this feeling, so it creates rationalizations. They only succeeded because they cheated. They were just lucky. Their time will come. These excuses are not the truth. They are shields, crafted by the mind to soften the unbearable sting of inadequacy. Freud called this rationalization, but beneath it all lies envy's raw energy. Carl Jung offered a different but complementary view. He placed envy in the shadow, the part of the psyche we refuse to acknowledge. Each of us carries traits we despise in ourselves, often because they conflict with our self-emulation. When we see those traits embodied successfully in others, envy ignites. The artist envies the more gifted artist because he sees his own inadequacy reflected. The intellectual envies the more brilliant thinker because he fears his own limitations. In Jung's terms, envy is the shadow, screaming, "That should have been me." Modern psychology provides further insight. Cognitive behavioral theory suggests that envy is the product of distorted comparisons. Instead of evaluating ourselves by our own growth, we measure against others. The mind whispers, "If they are ahead, I must be behind." This zero-sum thinking turns life into a race, where one person's gain automatically feels like another's loss. But reality is rarely so cruel. The distortion lies in perception. Neuroscience has even traced envy's fingerprints in the brain. Studies using fMRI scans reveal that when people feel envy, regions associated with physical pain light up. Envy literally hurts. And disturbingly, when those same people witness the misfortune of the envied, the brain's reward centers glow. In other words, envy is not just an emotion, it is an addiction to the suffering of others. Nietzsche, ever the diagnostician of the soul, saw envy as the seed of ressentiment. When people cannot act on their envy directly, they internalize it, transform it into moral judgments, and weaponize it against their betters. This is how envy mutates into ideology. Instead of saying, "I cannot be as great as you," the envious declare, "Your greatness is evil, and my weakness is virtue." This inversion is seductive because it soothes the envious wound while demanding nothing of the self. Consider the workplace. A rising employee is promoted. Instead of inspiring others to grow, it provokes whispers, "They must have been favored." Or in politics, one leader rises in popularity, and opponents redefine popularity itself as dangerous demagoguery. This is envy transformed into principle, ressentiment disguised as wisdom. Jung warned that envy unacknowledged is envy uncontrolled. The more one denies the shadow, the more power it gains. Envy thrives in silence, but when brought to awareness, when we admit, "Yes, I feel envy," it begins to lose its grip. Awareness is the first antidote. And yet the envious rarely confess. That is why envy is so dangerous. It thrives in the dark. It poisons silently until it erupts in betrayal, sabotage, or quiet hatred. It turns colleagues into conspirators, friends into rivals, even nations into enemies. Thus, the psychological portrait of envy is clear. It is pain masked as pleasure, admiration twisted into resentment, insecurity camouflaged as critique. It is both ancient and modern, both individual and collective. and it will continue to haunt us unless we learn to name it, face it, and disarm it. If envy poisoned Cain's heart in the fields of Eden, what does it look like in the digital age? Today, envy no longer needs whispers in the shadows of palaces or temples. It has a stage, a global one, lit by the glowing screens we carry in our pockets. Social media is envy's perfect playground. Every scroll is a comparison, every like is a scoreboard, every photo is a performance of happiness curated to spark admiration, and, inevitably, envy. The ancient philosophers warned us about the dangers of comparison, but never could they have imagined a world where billions wake up every morning and voluntarily measure their lives against strangers. Nietzsche's warning about ressentiment echoes here. Social platforms are saturated with envy disguised as virtue. People shame others for wealth while coveting it. They attack beauty while longing for it. They condemn success while secretly craving it. What looks like moral outrage is often nothing more than envy-seeking camouflage. The cancel culture phenomenon, in part, rides on this wave. While genuine accountability is real, envy also rides its coattails. Ready to drag down anyone who dares to rise above the crowd. The workplace tells the same story in quieter tones. Promotions spark smiles in public, but resentment in private. A colleague's innovation inspires applause in meetings, but gossip at the water cooler. Corporate environments are supposed to reward merit, but they also magnify comparison. And where comparison thrives, envy is never far behind. How many promising leaders have been undermined, not by incompetence, but by the silent plots of envious rivals? Envy also shapes politics in ways we rarely admit. Campaigns often run not on visions of growth, but on the promise of pulling down those deemed too privileged. Politicians exploit envy like fuel, knowing it mobilizes crowds faster than reason. "Why should they have what you do not?" becomes a rallying cry. Yet when policy is built on envy rather than vision, nations weaken, they do not rise. They merely redistribute resentment. Even within families, envy persists. The success of one sibling can fracture the harmony of an entire household. Parents may unwittingly feed it, praising one child more than another. Holidays become quiet competitions, weddings, graduations, even funerals. Moments meant for unity often unmask the envy simmering beneath the surface. And what of culture itself? Modern advertising thrives on envy. Commercials do not simply sell products, they sell status. The implicit message, if you do not own this, you are less. Fashion, technology, even fitness, industries profit by provoking envy, by making people feel inadequate until they purchase relief. The marketplace has learned what Cain never admitted. Envy is powerful currency. Carl Jung might say that our entire culture projects its shadow onto itself. Instead of facing our insecurity, we glamorize it, monetize it, and call it lifestyle. Freud would argue that envy is sublimated into consumerism. We channel resentment into endless consumption, hoping to soothe the wound. But the wound never heals. It only deepens. Yet there is hope. Awareness creates distance. When you scroll through curated lives on Instagram, ask yourself, is this real or is this performance? When you feel the sting of envy toward a colleague, ask, what is this revealing about my own shadow, my own hunger? And when you hear leaders stoking resentment, ask, are they guiding us upward? Or are they weaponizing envy to drag others down? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Applied to envy, this means the envy you feel is not about the other person's success, it is about your interpretation of their success as a threat. Change the interpretation, and the poison loses its grip. But to change it, one must first admit it. And admitting envy remains the hardest task of all. We have walked through envy's secret corridors, from Cain and Abel to social media feeds, from ancient myths to modern offices. We have seen its mask, its poison, its history, and its psychology. Now the question remains, how do we defend ourselves from envy's destructive force? How do we keep it from corroding our relationships, our culture, and our very souls? First, we must learn to spot envy in others. Not every smile is sincere, not every word of praise is free of barbs, but detection requires subtlety, not paranoia. Look for patterns. The friend who only congratulates you reluctantly, the colleague whose jokes always cut in the same direction, the advisor whose counsel dims your light rather than strengthens it. Remember what Marcus Aurelius advised: observe the soul of another, not the mask. The signs are faint but real. Hesitation in joy, eagerness in your setbacks, backhanded praise disguised as encouragement. Once seen, they cannot be unseen. But spotting envy in others is only half the battle. The greater work is to confront envy in ourselves. Jung's teaching on the shadow is crucial here. Envy does not disappear by denial. The more we repress it, the stronger it grows. Instead, we must drag it into the light. Admit it, name it. When you feel that sting, why them, not me, resist the urge to camouflage it with excuses. Ask yourself, what does this envy reveal about my own unfulfilled desires? What about the gifts I have neglected to cultivate? In this way, envy becomes a teacher. Instead of plotting another's fall, it can reveal the areas where you must rise. Envy points not to their excess, but to your hunger. It shows you where you are not yet whole. To acknowledge envy without succumbing to it is to transform it into fuel for growth. Nietzsche, though often harsh, offers wisdom here. He saw envy as inevitable, proof that life is striving, that we are wired to compare and to compete, but he urged us to sublimate it into creation. Rather than resenting greatness, let it inspire you. Rather than wishing to see others fall, rise so high that comparison becomes irrelevant. The truly strong, Nietzsche believed, turn envy into art, philosophy, achievement. Practically, this means cultivating gratitude. Gratitude is envy's antidote. When you train yourself to see abundance in your own life, your talents, your progress, your relationships, the poison of comparison weakens. Gratitude shifts the gaze from what you lack to what you already hold. As the Stoics taught, wealth is not in having more, but in wanting less. It also means guarding your own heart against the traps of admiration. Understand that the moment you rise, envy will gather around you. Do not be surprised when it comes. Do not be naive when smiles mask resentment. Prepare for it as every leader in history had to prepare. Accept envy as the tax of greatness. Do not waste energy resenting it. Instead, cultivate inner strength so that envy cannot sway you. Finally, practice what Sartre called authenticity. Living by your own values, rather than in the distorted mirror of others' opinions. When you live authentically, envy loses its leverage. The applause of the crowd matters less. The whispers of rivals matter even less. Your compass is internal. And when the compass is internal, no amount of external envy can drag you off course. So, what is the secret life of envy? It is the hidden theater of resentment, the smile that plots, the mask that hides insecurity. But it is also a mirror, showing us the wounds we have not healed, the shadows we have not faced. To master envy, we must both defend against it in others and transform it within ourselves, because envy will never vanish from the human story. It will always smile in the Senate, always whisper on social media, always linger in the workplace and the home. But the one who sees it, names it and rises above it, that person cannot be toppled by it. So, the next time someone smiles, while secretly plotting your fall, do not fear. See clearly, stand firmly, turn envy's shadow into your light. This is self-mastery, not the absence of envy, but its transformation.